Picture this. A scroll slips from the hands of a courier in the dead of night, its contents so vital that empires could crumble if the wrong eyes saw it. But before it reaches its destination, a shadowy figure intercepts it, deciphers its code, and vanishes into the darkness. This wasn't some scene from a modern spy thriller. This was everyday life for the unsung heroes of ancient intelligence networks. Long before satellites or wiretaps, spies were the invisible architects of history, pulling strings behind the curtains of power. Their stories aren't just tales of intrigue. They're the hidden blueprints of how civilizations conquered, survived, or collapsed. And today, we're pulling back the veil on their secret world. Think about the most famous battles or political upheavals of the ancient world: the fall of Troy, the rise of Rome, the machinations of Persia or Egypt. What if I told you that many of these turning points weren't decided by armies alone, but by the cunning of spies? These agents didn't just gather information. They forged alliances, spread disinformation, and even orchestrated coups, all while remaining nameless in the history books. They wore disguises as merchants, diplomats, or even slaves, blending into the background until the moment they struck. Their tools weren't gadgets, but ingenuity, invisible ink made from milk, messages hidden in wax tablets, or signals woven into everyday conversations. And their influence immeasurable. But here's what's even more fascinating: their legacy isn't confined to the past. The techniques they pioneered, code breaking, psychological manipulation, even early forms of surveillance, are the foundations of modern intelligence. Ever wonder why we still study Sun Tzu's Art of War or the strategies of Byzantine spies? Because their lessons are timeless. So as we journey through this shadowy realm, you'll discover how a single well-placed whisper could topple a dynasty, how a forged letter could ignite a war, and why the greatest power in history wasn't always the sword, but the secret. Ready to uncover the truth? Let's begin. The earliest spies didn't wear black cloaks or carry daggers. They carried clay tablets and the gift of observation. In ancient Mesopotamia around 4,000 years ago, rulers like Hammurabi didn't just build walls to protect their cities. They built networks of eyes and ears. Imagine a merchant traveling between city-states, casually noting troop movements or overhearing tavern gossip. That merchant might have been one of history's first documented spies, paid to report back to the king's advisors. These informants were so vital that Hammurabi's famous law code even included punishments for false reporting, proving how seriously intelligence was taken even then. Across the sands of Egypt, pharaohs employed scribes as their secret agents, men who could read and write, a rare skill that made them perfect for covert work. They'd embed themselves in foreign courts, recording everything from grain storage locations to whispers of rebellion. One surviving papyrus from the reign of Ramses II reveals how Egyptian spies posed as desert nomads to infiltrate rival kingdoms, using coded messages scratched onto pottery shards. These weren't just random acts of deception. They were systematic intelligence operations, complete with handlers and dead drops. But the real game changer came with the Hittites, who turned spying into a science. Their agents didn't just gather information, they spread carefully crafted lies to destabilize enemies. A single Hittite spy could pose as a defector, feeding false troop counts to enemy generals, or bribe local priests to predict doom unless their city surrendered. What made these early networks so effective was their understanding of human nature. They knew fear and ambition could be sharper weapons than any sword. What's remarkable isn't just how old espionage is, but how little its core principles have changed. Whether it was a Babylonian agent counting soldiers at the city gates or a modern analyst studying satellite images, the goal remains the same: see what others want hidden and protect what you value most. These ancient spies wrote the first playbook for shadow wars, a playbook we're still following today. When the sun blazed over the Nile, casting shadows across the temples of Thebes, Egypt's spies were already at work, not in the spotlight, but in the spaces between power and deception. Pharaohs understood that an empire stretched thin across deserts and rivers needed more than chariots to survive. It needed eyes everywhere. Take the reign of Ramses II, a master of using intelligence to turn the tide of war. Before the clash at Kadesh, his scouts infiltrated Hittite camps disguised as desert traders, counting soldiers and noting weaknesses. But here's where it gets brilliant. When those spies were captured, they carried false battle plans, feeding the Hittites misinformation that lured them into a trap. This wasn't just luck. It was a calculated web of lies woven by the world's earliest psychological operatives, and the tools they used straight from nature's workshop. Scribes would write messages in plain water or milk on papyrus, invisible until heated over a flame, revealing secrets to the right pair of eyes. Hieroglyphs, already a complex language, were tweaked into coded versions where a crocodile might symbolize an enemy general or a reed stand for a troop movement. Even something as simple as a merchant's ledger could hide vital intelligence, with grain quantities secretly corresponding to garrison sizes. But perhaps the most daring tactic was embedding agents as diplomatic staff. Egyptian envoys sent to negotiate treaties with rival kingdoms were often trained spies, memorizing fortress layouts or eavesdropping on court gossip. One account describes a pharaoh's spy who posed as a translator, subtly twisting the words of foreign ambassadors during negotiations to steer outcomes in Egypt's favor. It was diplomacy as a weapon where every handshake could be a sleight of hand. What set Egypt apart wasn't just their methods, but their understanding that information flowed both ways. They protected their own secrets fiercely, executing scribes caught leaking royal decrees and burying sensitive records in hidden temple archives. In a world where knowledge was as valuable as gold, they built the first known counterintelligence systems, proving that the game of shadows wasn't just about seeing, but about staying unseen. While Egypt mastered the art of coded messages and infiltration, the Persian Empire took espionage to an entirely new scale, turning it into the glue that held history's largest empire together. At its peak, Persia stretched from the Nile to the Indus River, ruling over dozens of cultures and languages. How did one king control such a vast, unruly domain? The answer lay in an invisible army, the eyes and ears of the king, a sprawling network of spies, informants, and enforcers who made sure no rebellion went unnoticed and no governor grew too powerful. These weren't just random snitches, they were carefully placed assets in every satrapy or province, reporting directly to the royal court. Picture a tax collector who quietly noted which local leaders seemed too wealthy, or a traveling musician who memorized gossip in market squares. Even royal couriers doubled as intelligence gatherers, their routes designed to pass through unstable regions. The system was so thorough that the Persian king could often crush revolts before they even began because someone, somewhere, had whispered a warning in time. But Persia's real genius was in weaponizing misinformation. Before facing a rebellious army, they'd deploy fake defectors, soldiers who'd desert to the enemy, only to feed them false battle plans. One legendary account describes Persian spies spreading rumors of an impending plague in a rival city, causing panic and mass desertions without a single arrow being fired. They understood that fear could conquer far more efficiently than force. And then there were the royal inspectors, known as the King's Eyes, who arrived unannounced in provinces to audit records and interview citizens. Their visits were so feared that just the rumor of their approach could make corrupt officials flee. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about deterrence. By making surveillance omnipresent but unpredictable, the Persians created an empire where loyalty wasn't optional, it was the only safe choice. What set Persia apart was its bureaucratic brilliance. They institutionalized espionage, giving it budgets, hierarchies, and even training protocols. Surviving clay tablets from Persepolis detail payments to agents, while ancient historians like Herodotus marveled at their relay system of messenger horses that could speed intelligence across thousands of miles faster than anyone thought possible. In many ways, Persia built the first national intelligence agency, a machine that didn't just react to threats, but actively shaped the empire's destiny. Yet for all its sophistication, the system had one flaw. It relied entirely on the king's strength. When weak rulers took the throne, the eyes and ears grew blind and the empire frayed. That's the irony of power built on secrets. It's only as strong as the one who holds the key. The Trojan horse wasn't just a clever trick, it was one of history's most audacious spy operations. Imagine the scene. After years of failed siege, the Greeks pretend to sail away, leaving behind a massive wooden gift for the Trojans, hidden inside. Not just warriors, but elite agents who'd spent months studying Trojan defenses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This wasn't merely a military tactic, it was psychological warfare, exploiting trust and ritual. The Greeks knew the Trojans would see the horse as a sacred offering, a symbol of surrender to their gods, and that's precisely why it worked, because the best deception plays on what people want to believe. But the horse was just the tip of the iceberg. Greek city-states like Sparta and Athens turned espionage into a refined art. Sparta's cryptae weren't just spies. They were a shadowy brotherhood of young warriors tasked with surveilling the Helot population, Sparta's enslaved class. By infiltrating their ranks as laborers or beggars, these agents rooted out potential rebellions before they could ignite. One chilling account describes cryptae agents staging fake drunken brawls to identify Helots who spoke too freely about resistance. It was state-sanctioned counterintelligence designed to maintain control through fear and secrecy. Athens, meanwhile, took a more diplomatic approach. Their spies often posed as merchants, leveraging the city's bustling trade networks to gather intelligence abroad. During the Peloponnesian War, Athenian agents intercepted Spartan letters written on wooden tablets coated with wax, scratching away the surface to reveal hidden messages underneath. They even developed early forms of encryption, rearranging letters in seemingly innocent poems to convey troop movements. One Athenian general, Alcibiades, famously switched sides multiple times, using his insider knowledge to manipulate both Sparta and Athens like pieces on a board. His exploits proved that in the game of empires, loyalty was negotiable, but information was priceless. What set Greek spies apart was their understanding of human psychology. They didn't just steal secrets, they crafted narratives. Before the Battle of Salamis, Themistocles spread false rumors among Persian informants that the Greek fleet was in disarray, luring the enemy into a naval trap. And in Sicily, Athenian spies bribed local guides to lead their enemies into treacherous terrain. Every move was calculated to exploit pride, greed, or desperation. The legacy of these tactics echoes far beyond antiquity. Modern intelligence agencies still study Greek methods, from disinformation campaigns to the use of double agents. Because while technology has changed, the human mind hasn't. Whether it's a wooden horse or a forged email, the principles of deception remain the same. know your enemy's fears, and you'll hold the keys to their defeat. Rome's legions may have conquered with sword and shield, but it was the empire's shadow warriors, the frumentarii and speculators, who truly secured its dominance. Picture a humble grain merchant traveling the empire's roads, his carts loaded with wheat. To most, he was just another supplier keeping Rome fed. But beneath those sacks lay something far more valuable: coded reports on rebel movements, sketches of enemy fortifications, even whispers of disloyal governors. These were the frumentarii, Rome's original undercover agents, whose very name meant grain men, a perfect disguise for men who fed the empire information instead of bread. Their counterparts, the speculators, operated with even greater stealth. Originally military scouts, they evolved into the emperor's personal eyes, carrying sealed messages across provinces and infiltrating barbarian camps under the guise of deserters. One account describes a speculator who posed as a Germanic tribesman for months, learning their language and customs before leading Roman troops to a hidden mountain pass that decided the campaign. Their greatest weapon wasn't brute force, but patience, the ability to wait years for the perfect moment to strike. Augustus, Rome's first emperor, transformed these units into something far more sinister: a domestic surveillance network. His frumentarii didn't just watch enemies abroad. They prowled Rome's streets, eavesdropping on senators in bathhouses and scribbling down tavern talk. When a noblewoman named Cornelia plotted against the emperor, it was her own household's grain supplier, a frumentarius in disguise, who delivered the damning evidence. The system was so effective that emperors could often crush rebellions before the conspirators even met. But absolute power corrupts absolutely. By the 3rd century, the frumentarii had morphed from protectors into predators, blackmailing wealthy citizens or fabricating charges for bribes. One notorious agent named Carus became so feared that senators would pay him vast sums just to avoid his attention. The very tools that secured Rome's stability became instruments of terror, proving that unchecked espionage can rot an empire from within. What makes Rome's spy network so fascinating isn't just its sophistication, but its cautionary tale. They mastered the art of seeing without being seen, yet failed to guard against their own ambition. In the end, the frumentarii were disbanded not by enemies, but by an emperor terrified of their power, a reminder that even the sharpest sword can cut both ways. While Rome built its empire on fear and bureaucracy, across the continent, Chinese strategists were refining espionage into something closer to philosophy. Sun Tzu's The Art of War didn't just mention spies in passing. It devoted an entire chapter to them, classifying agents into 5 meticulous categories. There were local spies recruited from enemy territories, inward spies who infiltrated rival courts, converted spies turned from the opposition, doomed spies sent to spread false intelligence, and surviving spies who returned with genuine secrets. This wasn't just a list, it was a masterclass in psychological warfare, recognizing that every human weakness, greed, pride, fear, could be exploited to bend an enemy's will without drawing a sword. Take the doomed spies, perhaps the most ruthless of Sun Tzu's tools. These were operatives deliberately fed false information and sent into enemy hands, knowing they'd be tortured into revealing lies that would mislead their captors. One account from the Warring States period describes a general who sacrificed his own scouts, letting them be captured with fabricated battle plans that lured an opposing army into a canyon where ambushing forces wiped them out. It was cold calculus, the lives of a few for the victory of thousands. But Chinese spies weren't just about deception, they were innovators. During the Tang dynasty, military commanders used kites not as toys but as airborne messengers. A silk kite flown at a specific angle might signal an impending attack, while a sequence of colored kites could coordinate troop movements across vast distances. Some even carried small flutes that whistled in the wind, creating coded melodies audible only to those who knew the cipher. Then there was the art of yin shu, hidden writing. Spies perfected techniques like writing with rice starch on blank paper, invisible until brushed with iodine, or carving messages into bamboo strips that appeared normal until heated to reveal hidden characters. One legendary song dynasty agent even encoded intelligence in folk songs, altering lyrics to report enemy numbers through seemingly innocent verses sung in marketplaces. What set China apart was its systematic approach. Emperors maintained jianye, or spy bureaus, where agents trained in languages, forgery, and even regional dialects to blend in seamlessly. During the Han Dynasty, these bureaus became so advanced that they kept dossiers on foreign leaders, detailing everything from their battle tactics to their favorite wines, early profiles used to predict behavior. Yet for all its sophistication, Chinese espionage had a poetic duality. Spies were both revered and reviled, celebrated in scrolls as the ghosts who win wars, yet barred from receiving public honors. Because the greatest trick of all was making sure no one ever knew they'd been tricked. Sun Tzu's words still echo today. All warfare is based on deception. And nowhere was that more true than in the shadows where his spies once walked. Long before modern intelligence, agencies filed reports in triplicate. Ancient India's spies operated by a different code, one written in the crisp, ruthless verses of the arthashastra. Penned by the legendary strategist Chanakya in the 4th century BCE, this wasn't just a manual on statecraft. It was a masterclass in subterfuge, outlining spy networks so meticulous they'd put many modern systems to shame. Chanakya understood that empires weren't built on battles alone, but on whispers, the kind gathered by poisoners posing as royal chefs, or holy men who carried coded messages in their prayer beads. Take the case of the Vishakanyas, or poison maidens. These were women trained from childhood to ingest small doses of toxins until their very bodies became weapons. A seemingly innocent dancer at a rival king's feast could slip poison into his cup, her immunity making her the perfect assassin. But Chanakya's genius lay in balance. For every violent tactic, there were subtler ones. His Gadhapurushas, or secret agents, blended into crowds as farmers, merchants, even beggars, each chosen for their ability to go unnoticed while absorbing every detail. One account describes a spy who posed as a madman, his ramblings dismissed by the court until someone realized his nonsense contained precise troop counts hidden in riddles. The Mauryan Empire didn't just use spies, it institutionalized them. Emperor Chandragupta, Chanakya's protege, divided agents into two categories: samsthas, who operated under permanent cover in foreign courts, and sancharas, roving spies who moved between roles as needed. Their reports flowed through a pyramid of handlers, ensuring no single agent knew the full network. Even children weren't overlooked. Orphans were recruited as Tikshna spies, their youthful faces masking sharp minds trained to eavesdrop in markets or servant quarters. But the Arthashastra's real innovation was its psychological depth. Chanakya knew secrets were useless without analysis, so he demanded spies study their target's habits. Did the enemy king drink too much? Did his generals argue over strategy? Such details shaped entire campaigns. Before attacking a fortified city, Mauryan agents might spread rumors of a curse on its walls, or bribe priests to declare omens unfavorable, eroding morale without lifting a sword. Yet for all its cunning, the system had a flaw. It thrived on paranoia. Chanakya warned rulers to spy even on their own families, breeding an atmosphere of perpetual distrust. Some historians believe this very web of suspicion weakened the Mauryan dynasty over time as emperors grew isolated by their own secrecy, a stark reminder that while shadows can protect power, they can also choke it. What makes the arthashastra timeless isn't just its techniques, but its recognition that information is fluid, a river to be diverted, dammed, or unleashed as needed. Centuries later, its principles still resonate. The best spies aren't those who steal secrets, but those who shape the story before it's even written. If Rome's spies were the sword, Byzantium's agents were the scalpel, precise, subtle, and deadly when needed. Meet the agents in rebus, Latin for those who take care of things. On paper, they were imperial couriers delivering messages across the empire's sprawling bureaucracy. In reality, they were the Byzantine emperor's personal shadow army, trained to intercept, decipher, and even rewrite sensitive documents before they reached their destinations. One surviving account describes an agent steaming open a sealed letter from a rebellious governor, copying its contents, then resealing it with forged wax so perfectly the recipient never suspected a thing. Their methods were as varied as they were ruthless. Some posed as merchants in foreign courts, bribing servants to eavesdrop on private conversations. Others became masters of disguise. One agent famously infiltrated a Persian military camp by pretending to be a desert mystic, his prophecies subtly steering enemy strategy toward Byzantine interests. But their most daring trick was the staged defection. A well-trained agent's operative would desert to an enemy camp, feeding them false battle plans or sowing discord among allies. One such agent spent years convincing a Gothic warlord that his own generals were plotting against him, crumbling his army from within without a single Byzantine soldier lifting a sword. Under Emperor Justinian, this network reached its zenith. His spymaster, the legendary Narses, didn't just collect intelligence, he weaponized it. When a plot to assassinate Justinian emerged in Constantinople's hippodrome, agents infiltrated the conspirators' inner circle, learning every detail before the plotters could strike. The result, a midnight raid that ended with the ringleaders hanged before dawn. Another time, they intercepted a secret pact between Persia and the Vandals, allowing Justinian to launch a preemptive invasion that reclaimed North Africa. What set Byzantium apart was its bureaucratic brilliance. The agents weren't lone wolves. They were part of a meticulously organized logothetes ton Agelon, an intelligence bureau with cryptographers, forgers, and even a dedicated team of memory men who could recite entire conversations verbatim. They pioneered early forms of steganography, hiding messages in plain sight like a seemingly innocent hymn where the first letters of each line spelled out troop movements. Yet their greatest legacy wasn't just their tricks but their influence. When Byzantine Princess Theodora married Holy Roman Emperor Otto II, she brought agents' tactics to Europe's courts. Their methods became the blueprint for medieval spycraft, from Venice's notorious Council of Ten to the whispered intrigues of Tudor England, a reminder that while empires rise and fall, the art of the shadow war never truly fades, it just finds new faces. When longships appeared on the horizon, they weren't just bringing warriors, they carried masters of deception. The Vikings understood that a successful raid depended not on brute force alone, but on knowing exactly where to strike. Before burning a single village, they'd send advance teams disguised as harmless traders, their ships loaded with furs and amber instead of axes. These merchants would linger in coastal markets, listening to drunken boasts about weak points in local defenses or memorizing tide patterns that could make the difference between a swift retreat and disaster. One Norse saga recounts how a spy named Skarphedin spent an entire winter in a Saxon town, apprenticing to a blacksmith just to learn where the chieftain stored his gold. But their intelligence gathering went far beyond theft. Viking explorers like Leif Erikson didn't stumble upon Vinland by accident. They relied on meticulous reconnaissance. Indigenous hunters told Eriksson's crew about fertile lands to the west, details he verified by sending scouts ashore to live among local tribes for months. These agents learned everything from safe harbors to seasonal food sources, turning raw data into survival strategies. When Eriksson established his short-lived settlement, it wasn't just luck, it was the culmination of calculated espionage. Their most ingenious tactic, exploiting superstition, Viking spies would pose as mystics, predicting disasters that conveniently aligned with their planned attacks. A well-timed prophecy about a village being cursed could scatter defenders before the first longship landed. Others used their reputation as feared raiders to manipulate perceptions. A single spy might spread rumors of an impending fleet, causing towns to empty before a handful of Vikings even arrived. What made them exceptional wasn't just their brutality, but their adaptability. A Viking spy in Francia might adopt Christianity to blend into monastery towns, while one in the east could pass as a ruse merchant along the Volga trade routes. They didn't just collect information, they became part of the landscape, learning languages and customs until no one suspected the foreigner in their midst. Yet their greatest legacy might be their navigational secrets: Viking sunstones, crystals that polarized light to locate the sun on cloudy days, were more than tools, they were classified intelligence. Only senior captains knew their use, ensuring enemies couldn't replicate their voyages. When combined with oral sailing charts passed down through coded poems, it created an intelligence network that spanned continents. The Vikings remind us that espionage isn't always about shadows and ciphers. Sometimes it's about walking boldly into the light, armed with nothing but a sharp mind and the willingness to listen. Their ships may have faded into legend, but their tactics, blending in, adapting, and turning whispers into weapons, remain timeless. The Crusades weren't just clashes of swords and faith, they were battles of wits where the right whisper could topple a kingdom. Take the Knights Templar, those iconic warrior monks in their white mantles. Behind their pious image lay one of medieval Europe's most sophisticated spy rings. While they publicly protected pilgrims, their agents moved silently through bazaars and brothels, disguised as merchants or even lepers, roles so unremarkable they became invisible. One account describes a Templar beggar stationed outside Damascus for years, his bowl collecting alms by day and secret messages by night, their greatest weapon. The banking system they invented to fund crusades doubled as an intelligence network. Pilgrims depositing gold in Paris might unknowingly carry coded letters to Jerusalem, hidden in the wax seals of financial documents. On the other side of the conflict, Muslim leaders wielded the Hashashin, not just assassins, but psychological operatives who turned fear into a weapon. These agents didn't just kill, they staged spectacles. A Hashashin might infiltrate a Crusader lord's bedchamber to leave a dagger on his pillow, proving he could reach him anytime. Their most infamous hit, the murder of Conrad of Montferrat, King of Jerusalem, in broad daylight, wasn't just about removing a threat. It was theater designed to paralyze enemy morale. The assassins often posed as Christian converts, studying scripture to pass undetected. One even served as a bishop's scribe for months, copying letters while memorizing troop movements hidden in their margins. But the real espionage chess match happened in plain sight. Pilgrims traveling to holy sites were ideal covers, their piety above suspicion. A devout merchant might sketch fortress layouts under the guise of drawing religious icons, or a repentant soldier could join enemy ranks to report on supply routes. Saladin, the legendary Muslim commander, famously employed Christian mercenaries as double agents, feeding false retreat plans to Crusader forces. Meanwhile, Richard the Lionheart spies spread rumors among Saracen troops that their own leaders had betrayed them, sparking desertions that decided battles. What made Crusades-era spies so effective was their understanding of cultural blind spots. A Templar fluent in Arabic could pose as a Syrian trader, while a Hashashin mimicking Frankish manners might dine in a crusader's hall unnoticed. They exploited the chaos of holy war where refugees, deserters, and traders flowed constantly between lines to become ghosts in the machine, yet their legacy isn't just in the shadows. Modern terms like assassin and thug from the Indian thuggy trace back to these medieval operatives. Even today's intelligence agencies study their methods, proving that while the Crusades ended centuries ago, the silent war they waged, the one fought with poisoned cups and forged letters, never really faded. It just evolved. The Renaissance didn't just rebirth art and science, it reinvented the shadow war. As Europe's fractured kingdoms coalesced into powerful nation-states, rulers realized that controlling territory meant controlling information. Enter Sir Francis Walsingham, Queen Elizabeth I's ruthless spymaster and the architect of England's first true intelligence service. His network stretched from the docks of Antwerp to the papal courts of Rome, a web of informants so vast that one historian called it a kingdom of whispers. Walsingham's greatest coup, uncovering the Babington Plot, a scheme to assassinate Elizabeth and crown Mary, Queen of Scots. His agents intercepted letters written in invisible ink between the lines of music sheets, cracked codes using early cipher wheels, and even turned Mary's own courier into a double agent. When Mary finally signed her death warrant in those decoded letters, it wasn't just a victory for England, it was proof that espionage could shape the fate of nations. Meanwhile, in Venice, the Council of Ten elevated spying to an art form. Their secret chancery, the Cancelleria Segreta, employed a small army of spies who reported everything from foreign ambassadors' dinner conversations to the movements of Ottoman fleets. Venetian agents pioneered dead drops using hollowed-out statues in St. Mark's Square and developed a cipher so complex that it remained unbroken for centuries. One particularly cunning spy, known only as the Greek, infiltrated the Sultan's court by posing as an astrologer, his predictions subtly steering Ottoman policy away from Venetian interests. Cryptography became the Renaissance spy's sharpest tool. Leon Battista Alberti's cipher wheel, invented in 1467, allowed messages to be scrambled with thousands of possible combinations, a quantum leap from simple letter substitutions. Spies like Giambattista della Porta took it further, writing manuals on how to hide messages in everything from boiled eggs to the stitches of clothing. But the real game-changer was steganography. A letter from a Medici agent might appear to discuss Florentine wool prices, while heat revealed ink between the lines detailed French troop movements. What set this era apart was its bureaucratic innovation. Unlike medieval spies who operated ad hoc, Renaissance agents had budgets, encrypted ledgers, and even pension plans. Walsingham's London headquarters functioned like a modern agency, with codebreakers, forgers, and interrogators working in specialized teams. His Black Chamber, where letters were covertly opened and copied, became the model for Europe's spy hubs. The Venetians went further, creating the first known intelligence archive, thousands of files cross-referencing agents, informants, and foreign leaders' vulnerabilities. Yet for all their sophistication, these networks shared a fatal flaw. They depended on the ruler's favor. When Elizabeth died, Walsingham's system crumbled within years. The Venetian archives, once feared across Europe, grew stagnant as bureaucrats prioritized secrecy over adaptability. A stark lesson that even the most brilliant spycraft can't outlast the institutions that nurture it. The Renaissance proved that espionage wasn't just about stealing secrets, it was about creating systems to protect them. From cipher wheels to double agents, the tools they forged didn't just serve their time, they became the foundation of every modern intelligence service. Because in a world where knowledge was power, the real masters weren't always those who wore the crown, but those who controlled the whispers behind the throne. Imagine receiving a coin as change in a crowded market, place completely ordinary, until you twist it just right, revealing a hidden compartment with a tiny scroll inside. This wasn't some fantasy gadget, it was standard issue for ancient spies. From Rome to the Silk Road, hollowed-out coins carried everything from invasion plans to assassination orders, their mundane appearance making them perfect for dead drops. But coins were just the beginning. Spies mastered the art of turning everyday objects into weapons of deception. Take the humble sandal. Roman agents would carve messages into the soles, leaving coded footprints in soft earth or wax that only trained eyes could decipher. Then there was the chemistry of secrecy. Long before modern invisible ink, Egyptian spies wrote with milk or lemon juice on papyrus messages that stayed blank until held near a flame. Chinese operatives took it further, mixing rice starch and iodine to create vanishing ink that appeared only when brushed with a special solution. One Tang Dynasty account describes a spy who painted an innocent landscape scroll, only for enemy agents to discover troop positions hidden in the strokes when sprayed with vinegar. Even something as simple as a wax tablet could conceal secrets. Roman diplomats would carve messages into the wood beneath the wax layer, knowing inspectors would stop at the surface. But perhaps the most elegant tool was the Greek cytale, a cipher device so clever it still inspires modern cryptography. Picture two Spartan generals, each holding identical rods. To send a coded message, one would wrap a leather strip around his cytale and write along its length. Unwound, the strip seemed like random letters until wrapped around the matching rod, where the message snapped into clarity. It was encryption in its purest form, meaningless without the key. Communication wasn't limited to the ground. Chinese spies used kite strings to send signals across enemy lines, varying colors and patterns to convey precise instructions. The Aztecs trained hummingbirds as messengers, their iridescent feathers hiding tiny scrolls in beaded collars. Nature's drones, too small and fast to intercept. And in the deserts of Arabia, tribes developed complex drum codes that could relay warnings across miles, their rhythms indistinguishable from celebratory music to untrained ears. What made these tools revolutionary wasn't just their ingenuity, but their psychology. The best spy gadgets didn't just hide information, they made people not want to look. A merchant's ledger filled with tedious grain tallies discouraged prying eyes, even if those numbers corresponded to garrison sizes. A drunkard's ramblings about omens masked battle plans in plain speech. These weren't just tricks, they were masterclasses in misdirection, proving that sometimes the best way to keep a secret isn't to bury it, but to leave it in the light, disguised as something no one would think to question. Delilah wasn't just a biblical seductress, she was one of history's earliest recorded intelligence operatives. When she coaxed Samson into revealing the secret of his strength, she wasn't acting on personal whim. She was executing a precise espionage mission for the Philistine rulers. This pattern repeated across civilizations. Women, often dismissed as politically insignificant, leveraged their social roles to access secrets no male agent could reach. In ancient China, the legendary beauty Zai Shi was trained by the Yu kingdom to infiltrate the court of their Wu enemies. Her mission be so captivating that the Wu king would neglect his duties. But Zai Shi went further. She memorized troop deployments whispered to her by besotted generals and smuggled them out in hair ornaments given to her loyal maids. The Byzantine Empress Theodora took this influence to staggering heights. Once an actress familiar with Constantinople's underworld, she used her network of entertainers and servants as a private intelligence force after marrying Emperor Justinian. Her spies, many of them women, moved through palace corridors and backstreet taverns with equal ease, uncovering plots against the throne. One of her most audacious moves involved intercepting letters between disloyal senators and the Ostrogothic queen Amalasuntha, then altering them to provoke a rift that crumbled their alliance. Theodora understood something most rulers didn't. Gossip wasn't just idle talk, it was currency, and women were its most skilled traders. Even in societies that barred women from formal power, espionage offered backdoor influence. Roman matrons like Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus, maintained networks of slaves and clients who reported everything from Senate whispers to kitchen conspiracies. When Augustus suspected a plot, it was often Livia's domestic chatter that identified the traitors. Half a world away, Hindu epics tell of Vishakanya's women raised on minute doses of poison until their kisses became lethal weapons. Kings would send them as gifts to rivals, their very bodies serving as living intelligence operations. What made female spies so effective was their invisibility. A courtesan's chambers, a queen's sewing circle, or a merchant's wife's dinner party, these were spaces where men let their guard down, where secrets spilled like wine. The Assyrian queen Semiramis allegedly disguised herself as her own son to eavesdrop on military councils, while Persian noblewomen used veils to pass coded messages during Zoroastrian festivals. Their greatest asset wasn't seduction, but societal blind spots, the assumption that women weren't players in the game of empires. Yet their legacies are often reduced to footnotes or myths, their strategies overshadowed by tales of male conquerors. That omission misses the truth. The silk fan could be as deadly as the sword, and the quietest voices sometimes held the most devastating secrets. From the pharaoh Hatshepsut's network of temple priestesses to the Viking seeresses who divined enemy weak points, women didn't just participate in ancient espionage. They perfected the art of winning wars without ever drawing a blade. Consider Demaratus, the exiled Spartan king who became one of antiquity's most unlikely heroes. Living in Persia after being dethroned, he learned of King Xerxes' massive invasion plans against Greece. But how could he warn his homeland without getting caught? His solution was ingenious and risky. He scraped the wax off a wooden writing tablet, carved the warning directly into the wood, then recoated it with wax to appear blank. When the tablet reached Sparta, Queen Gorgo suspected the ruse, scraping away the wax to reveal the hidden message. That single act of stealth saved countless lives, giving Greek city-states time to unite against the Persian juggernaut at Thermopylae. Then there was Clodius, the Roman spy who turned disguise into an art form. During the social war in the 1st century BCE, he infiltrated rebel camps not once but repeatedly, each time adopting a new identity. One night he'd be a drunken mercenary slurring battle plans from loose-lipped officers. The next, a wounded soldier carried into enemy lines, his bandages hiding sketches of fortifications. His most audacious stunt, posing as a soothsayer using divinations to plant false rumors that triggered infighting among rebel leaders. Clodius proved that the best spies weren't just observers, they were puppet masters pulling strings from the shadows. But not all legendary spies worked for kings or empires. Take the case of the unnamed Carthaginian agent who brought Rome to its knees during the Punic Wars. After being captured and enslaved by a Roman senator, he spent years meticulously copying confidential scrolls about military deployments. Then, during the festival of Saturnalia, when slaves were allowed temporary freedom, he escaped to Carthage with intelligence that enabled Hannibal's devastating ambush at Lake Trasimene. His mission exposed a chilling truth. Sometimes the most dangerous spies were the ones no one thought to watch. China's Tang dynasty had its own master of deception, the courtesan Lai Yi, whose poetry recitals masked a razor-sharp intellect. Sent to the court of a rebellious general, she used her talents to identify his allies through subtle cues, who laughed too heartily at his jokes, who exchanged glances during strategic discussions. Her reports, hidden in the knotted strings of her Guqin instrument, helped the emperor dismantle the conspiracy without bloodshed. Lai Yi's story reminds us that espionage's greatest weapons weren't always daggers, but wit and perception. These operatives shared one trait. They understood that information was only as valuable as the trust it exploited. Whether playing the long game like Demaratus or adapting like Clodius, they manipulated the human psyche as deftly as they navigated battlefields. Their legacies endure not just in the wars they swayed, but in the timeless lesson they taught that victory often belongs to those who master the art of seeing without being seen. Becoming an ancient spy wasn't about natural talent. It was about relentless training, often starting in childhood. In China, recruits for the Jianye spy bureaus didn't just memorize codes. They drilled in the three arts: martial combat, mimicry, and calligraphy. A young operative might spend mornings practicing sword forms to blend in with palace guards, afternoons perfecting regional dialects by reciting market gossip, and evenings mastering the delicate brushstrokes needed to forge imperial seals. The most elite even studied theater, learning to cry on command or feign drunkenness, skills that could mean the difference between extracting a secret and losing their heads. One Tang dynasty manual describes trainees being sent to crowded tea houses with a single task: eavesdrop on 3 conversations simultaneously, then repeat them verbatim to their handler. Rome's Frumentarii took a more brutal approach. New recruits, often chosen from the ranks of legionaries who'd shown cunning in battle, endured weeks of silent drills, where failure to blend into a foreign marketplace meant a lashing. They practiced forging travel permits by scratching wax tablets under moonlight, and memorized the subtle differences between, say, Syrian and Egyptian grain tariffs, details that could expose a fake merchant. Veteran agents would stage mock interrogations, teaching recruits to withstand torture by focusing on fabricated backstories so elaborate they felt real. One account tells of a trainee who spent 2 years posing as a Gallic blacksmith's apprentice, hammering swords by day and sketching fortress layouts by night, until even he nearly forgot his true identity. But perhaps the most rigorous training belonged to India's Gadhapurushas, as outlined in the arthashastra. Aspiring spies underwent the test of fire, dropped into enemy territory with nothing but a disguise and a week to procure vital intelligence. Some posed as beggars, using coded coughs to identify allies in crowded streets. Others infiltrated noble households as servants, learning to read upside down as their masters drafted war plans. Chanakya's manual warned that a single slip, a misplaced word, an overly curious glance could unravel years of work. Trainees who failed weren't just dismissed, they were often sent on suicide missions to erase the risk of compromise. What united these systems was their psychological depth. Byzantine handlers would abruptly switch a trainee's cover identity mid-mission, forcing them to abandon one persona and adopt another without hesitation. Persian recruits memorized not just terrain maps, but the drinking habits and superstitions of enemy generals, knowing that manipulation often hinged on personal quirks. A Spartan crypteia agent might be ordered to live among helots for months, eating their food and adopting their mannerisms until he could think like a slave to control slaves. This wasn't just skill building, it was identity alchemy. The best spies didn't merely pretend to be someone else, they buried their true selves so deep that even they sometimes doubted which life was real. When a Mauryan emperor's spy returned after a decade undercover in a rival kingdom, his own family reportedly didn't recognize him. That was the paradox of the craft. To become invisible, you had to erase yourself first. And that kind of transformation didn't come from talent. It came from training so intense it reshaped the mind. Julius Caesar didn't just conquer Gaul with legions, he did it with letters scrambled by his namesake cipher. Picture a Roman general receiving a scroll where every letter had shifted 3 places down the alphabet. D for A, E for B, and so on. To an outsider, it looked like gibberish. But to a soldier holding the cipher key, it revealed troop movements or assassination plots. This simple substitution, now called the Caesar cipher, was revolutionary for its time. Yet it had one flaw. Once enemies realized the pattern, cracking it was just a matter of trial and error. That's why Caesar's best agents didn't rely on the cipher alone. They paired it with tricks like writing messages backward or hiding them in seemingly innocent love poems, where only every third word held meaning. Meanwhile, Hebrew scribes were perfecting the Atbash cipher, a code so elegant it hid in plain sight within sacred texts. The system mapped the Hebrew alphabet onto itself in reverse. The first letter Aleph became the last Tav, Bet became Shin, and so on. When the prophet Jeremiah warned of Babylon's rise, he encrypted the name of the city as Sheshach using Atbash, a subtle act of resistance that shielded his message from prying eyes. But Atbash wasn't just for prophets. Jewish rebels during the Bar Kokhba revolt used it to coordinate attacks against Rome, carving coded orders into pottery shards that looked like mundane inventory lists to anyone who didn't know the key. Half a world away, Indian spies turned poetry into a weapon. The Kautilyan arthashastra describes agents using Emlakita Vikalpas, symbolic language where a phrase like "the lotus wilts at dawn" might secretly mean "attack the eastern gate at sunrise." These weren't random metaphors, they followed strict rules with flowers representing forts, animals symbolizing troop types, and weather indicating battle timing. A single verse recited in a marketplace could trigger a rebellion while seeming like nothing more than a bard's lament. What united these systems was their understanding of human psychology. The best codes didn't just scramble messages, they exploited how people see what they expect to see. A Caesar-ciphered letter might be tucked inside a shipment of wine jars, its wax seal stamped with a merchant's insignia to discourage scrutiny. Hebrew rebels wrote Atbash encoded orders in charcoal, knowing Roman soldiers would dismiss them as smudged laundry lists. And Indian spies perfected the art of sand-high double-meaning dialogues where a conversation about crop rotations could secretly arrange a royal coup. The irony, many of these ancient techniques still underpin modern encryption. The Caesar cipher's letter-shifting principle evolved into complex algorithms like ROT13, while Atbash inspired modern symmetric key cryptography. As for symbolic poetry, its legacy lives on in steganography, hiding data in everything from digital images to social media posts. The tools have grown more sophisticated, but the game remains the same. Protect the message by playing on the enemy's assumptions. Because whether carved in clay or transmitted through fiber optics, the oldest rule of espionage endures. The safest secret is the one nobody realizes exists. Zopyrus wasn't just a Persian spy, he was a masterpiece of deception, sent by King Darius I to infiltrate Babylon's impregnable walls. He staged his own defection with gruesome theatrics. Arriving at the city gates, he presented himself as a mutilated traitor, his nose and ears freshly severed supposedly by Darius's own hand as punishment. The Babylonians, convinced by his wounds and rage, welcomed him as an ally. What they didn't know, every slash and scream was part of the script. For months, Zopyrus fed Babylon's rulers false strategies, weakening their defenses until Persian forces stormed the city with ease. His sacrifice, losing his face to save his empire, became legendary, but it exposed a chilling truth. In the Shadow War, loyalty was negotiable, and the most valuable agents were often the ones who betrayed best. Rome faced its own Judas in the form of Quintus Varius, a senator who secretly worked for Carthage during the Punic Wars. His method was subtler than Zopyrus's. He manipulated grain prices to spark riots, then blamed political rivals, destabilizing Rome from within. When finally exposed, the Senate didn't just execute him. They threw his body into the Tiber as a warning, yet the damage was done. Varius proved that even the highest echelons of power weren't immune to corruption. Counterintelligence became an art form in response. The Byzantines developed the proskyntharis, a handler whose sole job was to watch their own spies for signs of disloyalty. One manual advised observing agents' spending habits. Sudden wealth or unexplained absences could mean they'd been turned. Chinese dynasties took it further, employing Fan Jian, reverse spies, double agents who pretended to defect back to the enemy, only to feed them poisoned information. A Tang general once accidentally let such a spy steal battle plans showing weak defenses in the east. When the enemy attacked there, they found not vulnerability, but an ambush waiting. The most ruthless tactic, the honey trap. Ancient Indian texts describe sending captured enemy spies back with falsified intelligence, but only after turning them through blackmail or bribes. The catch: the original captors knew these spies would be interrogated, so the false plans included just enough truth to be credible. It was a hall of mirrors where even betrayal could be weaponized. Yet for all their cunning, empires struggled with a paradox. The very skills that made spies invaluable, lying, adapting, surviving, also made them unpredictable. When a Mauryan double agent named Shalya was ordered home after years undercover, he refused, having genuinely come to admire his enemy's cause. His handler's response: a dagger in the dark, because in the end, the spy game wasn't about trust. It was about control and knowing when to cut the thread before it unraveled you. Long before spy novels filled bookshelves, ancient storytellers were weaving tales of deception that blurred the line between myth and tradecraft. The Bible's account of Hebrew spies' scouting canon reads like a field manual for covert operations. 2 agents hiding in the hills for 40 days, memorizing fortress weaknesses, and relying on a local woman named Rahab to shelter them from Jericho's soldiers. Her payment: a scarlet cord tied in her window, signaling her home for protection when Joshua's army attacked. This wasn't just divine intervention. It was an early example of agent extraction and the use of local assets. What makes the story remarkable isn't just its drama, but its realism. The spy's report emphasized not just military strength, but the morale of Canon's people, proving ancient operatives understood psychological warfare as keenly as terrain. The Mahabharata's Shakuni takes espionage into darker territory. This master manipulator didn't just gather intelligence, he weaponized human nature itself. During the infamous dice game that triggered the Kurukshetra War, Shakuni exploited the Kauravas' greed and the Pandavas' honor, rigging the match through psychological pressure as much as trickery. His spies, disguised as musicians and cooks, spent years studying the Pandavas' routines and vulnerabilities. When the moment came, every roll of the dice was informed by those observations, a reminder that ancient spies didn't just exploit physical weaknesses, but the cracks in their enemy's character. Homer's Odyssey, often celebrated for its heroes' adventures, is equally a manual of Mediterranean spycraft. Odysseus's infiltration of Troy as a beggar, filthy and unnoticed, mirrors real Spartan cryptire tactics. But his brilliance peaks when he tests his own household upon returning to Ithaca. Disguised as an old man, he gauges loyalty through carefully staged provocations, identifying allies and traitors before revealing himself. This two-tiered deception, spying on one's own people while maintaining cover, shows an sophistication that real-world Greek agents would later replicate during the Peloponnesian War. These stories endure because they capture espionage's timeless dilemmas. Rahab betrays her city for survival, Shakuni corrupts rather than conquers, and Odysseus lies even to loved ones for strategic advantage. The ancients understood what modern spy agencies still grapple with, that intelligence work exists in moral gray zones where loyalty and deception dance. When Virgil wrote Timeo Danaus et dona ferens, I fear the Greeks even bearing gifts, he wasn't just describing the Trojan horse, he was distilling a warning that echoes through every age. Trust is the first casualty in the shadow war. What makes these literary spies so compelling is their humanity. They aren't invincible super agents, but flawed individuals making impossible choices. The Mahabharata's Queen Gandhari blinds herself to share her husband's darkness, yet her network of blind servants becomes an intelligence asset, their heightened hearing detecting conspirators' whispers. It's a poetic paradox, the powerless turning their limitations into strengths, much like real spies transforming obscurity into influence. These narratives remind us that espionage isn't just about secrets and strategies, but about the people who carry them and the heavy prices they pay in the silent service of empires. Diplomatic missions in the ancient world often came with hidden agendas where the art of negotiation masked the silent work of intelligence gathering. When a Han Dynasty envoy rode into the tents of Chengnu nomad leaders, his silks and scrolls weren't just symbols of peace, they were cover for a meticulous operation. As he sipped fermented mare's milk and exchanged pleasantries, his trained eyes noted everything: the wear on the chieftain's armor, the tensions between sub-tribes, even the grazing patterns of their horses, details that revealed military readiness or famine. These diplomats were selected not just for eloquence, but for their ability to memorize conversations verbatim and spot vulnerabilities in seemingly friendly exchanges. One Han report describes an agent who averted war by noticing a rival clan's stolen tapestries in the chief's tent, proof of infighting he later exploited to fracture their alliance. The Byzantine Empire elevated this duality to statecraft. Their apocrisiarii, officially religious envoys to foreign courts, were trained to leverage pious reputations for espionage. A bishop's robe provided perfect cover. Who would suspect a man of God of counting garrison troops or sketching harbor depths? During sensitive negotiations with the Sassanids, a Byzantine cleric allegedly delayed talks for weeks, feigning illness while his acolyte, actually a junior agent, mapped the palace's hidden passages. Their final treaty included oddly specific clauses about Persian troop withdrawals from certain mountain passes, areas the spy had identified as indefensible. Even the Vikings, often portrayed as relentless raiders, understood the delicate dance of diplomatic espionage. Before launching raids on Frankish coasts, they'd send trading delegations to scout targets. These merchants-turned-spies studied everything from tide schedules to local feuds, sometimes even bribing monks for church records that listed wealthy parishioners. A Norse saga recounts how a spy named Otter avoided a disastrous attack on Paris by reporting that the city had recently reinforced its walls, intel gathered while negotiating a fake trade dispute. But the masters of this dual game were Venice's ambassadors during the Renaissance. Their dispatches home were encrypted masterpieces, blending flowery diplomatic niceties with cold strategic analysis. One ambassador's letter to the Doge began with praise for a French duke's hospitality, then segued into noting the duke's gout and his heir's gambling debts, weaknesses Venice later exploited. These envoys maintained sprawling networks of informants, from court musicians to linen washers, proving that the most vital intelligence often came from whispers, not battlefields. What made diplomatic spies so effective was their plausible deniability. When caught, they could claim misunderstandings or cultural faux pas, unlike military scouts who faced execution. A Hittite agent, exposed while probing Egyptian defenses during peace talks, simply blamed his curiosity about architecture. The pharaoh's amused response, granting him a guided tour of precisely the fortifications he'd wanted to see, shows how the game was played, with smiles hiding daggers of insight. Because in the end, the best treaties weren't just signed across tables. They were shaped in the shadows long before the ink dried. The temple at Delphi wasn't just a place of worship, it was one of antiquity's most sophisticated intelligence hubs. Pilgrims from across Greece and beyond traveled there seeking prophecies from the Pythia, the oracle who spoke in riddles from her smoke-filled chamber. What few realized was how much those cryptic pronouncements depended on earthly knowledge. The priests behind the scenes weren't just interpreting divine whispers, they were collating secrets. Wealthy visitors, desperate for favorable omens, would confide everything from military plans to marital scandals. Trade delegations spilled details about rival city-states' economies. Even generals disclosed troop movements, hoping the gods would bless their campaigns. Over centuries, the temple amassed a treasure trove of sensitive information, all under the sacred veil of piety. When the Pythia warned Sparta against attacking Athens, lest you destroy a great city, it wasn't just mysticism, it was calculated counsel based on Athens' recently fortified walls, details whispered by Athenian diplomats during earlier consultations. Buddhist monks in Asia wielded similar influence, their saffron robes granting unparalleled access. Emperor Ashoka of the Mauryan dynasty famously employed monks as emissaries, sending them to distant kingdoms with dual missions, spread Buddhist teachings and discreetly assess political stability. Their spiritual authority allowed them to cross borders closed to soldiers, while their reputation for detachment made rulers speak freely in their presence. One Tang dynasty chronicle describes a monk who spent years cataloging Tibetan fortress layouts under the guise of copying sutras, his brushstrokes hiding maps in the margins of sacred texts. Monasteries along the Silk Road became way stations for intelligence, their libraries storing coded reports alongside scripture. But the most audacious fusion of faith and espionage might be the Vatican's Secretum Apostolicum during the Renaissance. Cardinals doubling as spymasters ran networks of priest informants across Europe, their confessional booths doubling as intelligence-gathering stations. A nobleman seeking absolution for adultery might inadvertently reveal his cousin's plot against the Pope's secrets recorded in encrypted ledgers. When the Borgias needed to eliminate rivals, they didn't send assassins, they sent chaplains bearing poisoned communion wine. What made religious spies so effective was the universal assumption of their harmlessness. A priest could kneel beside a king in prayer one moment and slip a coded psalm into his sleeve the next. A nun's habit concealed not just her face, but her role as a courier for rebel messages during the Crusades. Even the Zoroastrian magi of Persia used fire rituals to mask signal fires coordinating military movements. This intersection of devotion and deception reveals a paradox. The very institutions built to connect humanity with the divine became conduits for its most earthly schemes. Not because faith was a lie, but because, like the oracles of old, it understood a fundamental truth. Where people bare their souls, they inevitably reveal their secrets too. Long before drones or satellites, ancient spies enlisted nature's own creatures as silent partners in their shadow wars. Picture a Roman legionary releasing a pigeon into the smoky dawn sky, its tiny leg carrying a scroll so light yet heavy with secrets. These birds weren't just messengers, they were feathered couriers trained to navigate battlefields and evade enemy arrows, their homing instincts making them the perfect stealth technology. But the Romans didn't stop there. They discovered that pigeons could be conditioned to fly only at night, their wings soundless against the stars, turning them into nocturnal spies that left no trace. Meanwhile, in the courts of ancient China, dogs weren't just loyal companions, they were elite operatives. Imperial handlers trained them to carry bamboo tubes strapped to their collars, trotting silently through enemy camps where a human messenger would be spotted instantly. One Tang Dynasty manual describes a hound named Zhu, Snow, who delivered battle plans through blizzards, her white fur blending seamlessly into the winter landscape. But the real genius lay in their training. These dogs ignored food from strangers, ensuring they wouldn't be lured off course by poisoned bait. Then there were the bees, nature's tiny poison detectors. Persian royalty employed them as living security systems during feasts. A beekeeper would release a few insects near each dish. If the bees avoided certain foods, it signaled the presence of toxins. This wasn't just superstition. Bees' acute sensitivity to alkaloids made them more reliable than human tasters. The tactic spread to Byzantium, where empresses kept hives in palace gardens as both a honey source and a safeguard against assassination. But perhaps the most unexpected animal agents were Hannibal's elephants, not just war machines, but early psychological warfare tools. Before battles, Carthaginian scouts would stampede a single elephant through enemy villages at night, leaving colossal footprints to fuel rumors of an unstoppable beast army. The terror these tracks inspired often made towns surrender without a fight. Similarly, Mongol horsemen used spare mounts as decoys, tying branches to their tails to kick up dust clouds that made their forces appear 10 times larger. What made animal spies so effective was their invisibility. A pigeon circling overhead drew no suspicion. A dog nosing through a market seemed harmless. Bees pollinating flowers, utterly ordinary. Ancient handlers understood something modern tech often overlooks. The best camouflage isn't high tech, it's blending into the rhythms of everyday life. From the carrier crows of India that could mimic human speech to deliver coded phrases, to the Persian cats strategically gifted to enemy generals, their habit of perching on maps conveniently revealing troop positions, these creatures turned the natural world into an extension of the spy's toolkit. Their legacy endures in surprising ways. Modern militaries still study Hannibal's elephant tactics for insights into disinformation campaigns, while homing pigeons inspired early radio frequencies. Even the humble honeybee's role in toxin detection finds echoes in today's chemical sensors, because when it comes to espionage, sometimes the oldest tricks, feathered, furred, or buzzing, are the ones that slip past our defenses most effortlessly. For every cunning spy who changed the course of history, there were dozens whose schemes crumbled in spectacular fashion. Take Phrynichus, the Athenian operative whose ambition outpaced his caution. Tasked with undermining his own city's democracy during the Peloponnesian War, he made one fatal mistake, trusting a co-conspirator who kept a secret diary. When the journal fell into enemy hands, Phrynichus's plot unraveled overnight. His assassination in the Agora wasn't just a punishment, it was a public spectacle designed to terrify would-be traitors. The lesson: even the most carefully laid plans could shatter on something as simple as a loose tongue or an incriminating scrap of papyrus. Then there was Persia's disastrous miscalculation at Marathon. King Darius's spies had assured him the Greeks were disorganized and cowardly, a report so wildly inaccurate it bordered on sabotage. Whether these agents were misled by Greek disinformation or simply too afraid to contradict their king's expectations, their flawed intelligence led to catastrophe. When the Persian army landed, they found not a fractured rabble but a united Greek force that crushed them in one of history's most lopsided battles. The spies' heads likely rolled alongside their infantry, a grim reminder that in the ancient world, intelligence failures carried mortal consequences. Even Rome's meticulous frumentarii suffered humiliating blunders. During the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE, a Roman agent posing as a Jewish defector was exposed when his Latin accent slipped during a midnight conversation. The rebels didn't just execute him, they used his forged documents to feed Rome false surrender terms, turning the spy's own tools against his masters. It was a cascading failure. Poor training in dialects led to exposure, which then enabled a devastating counterintelligence strike. China's Tang dynasty offers perhaps the most poetic spy fiasco. An operative named Lai Zion spent years cultivating a relationship with a Khitan chieftain, only to accidentally reveal his true allegiance by reflexively bowing to a passing imperial inspector. The chieftain, recognizing the gesture as one only a Tang official would make, had Lai Zion's head mounted on a spear with a mocking note, "The Empire sends us clumsy guests." The incident became a cautionary tale in spy bureaus for centuries. Sometimes, the smallest unconscious gesture could unravel years of deception. These failures expose a universal truth about ancient espionage. For all its sophistication, it remained a fragile human endeavor. A misremembered detail, a moment of overconfidence, or even a poorly timed sneeze could collapse an entire operation. Yet empires kept investing in spies because when the stakes were conquest or annihilation, the rewards outweighed the risks. After all, for every Phrynichus lying dead in the dust, there was a Demaratus slipping his wooden tablet past enemy lines, proof that in the Shadow War, one brilliant success could eclipse 1,000 blunders. The stealth tactics of ancient spies didn't vanish with crumbling empires. They evolved, embedding themselves into the DNA of modern intelligence agencies. Walk the halls of Langley or MI6 today, and you'll find dog-eared copies of Sun Tzu's The Art of War on analysts' desks, not as historical curiosities but as operational handbooks. His classification of spies into 5 types: locals, inward agents, turned assets, doomed pawns, and surviving operatives mirrors the recruitment frameworks used by contemporary agencies. When the CIA identifies a foreign official susceptible to bribery or ideological persuasion, they're applying a strategy as old as the Warring States period. Even the term honeypot trap, a staple of Cold War spycraft, echoes Chanakya's Vishakanya's women trained to weaponize intimacy millennia ago. Rome's frumentarii laid the groundwork for something even more profound: institutionalized surveillance. Their network of grain merchants doubling as informants foreshadowed today's bulk data collection, where everyday transactions, credit card payments, travel records paint intelligence mosaics. The Byzantine agents in reviews, with their mastery of intercepting and altering correspondence, would feel right at home in the era of cyber warfare, where emails are rerouted and disinformation campaigns launched with keystrokes. The parallels are uncanny. Ancient spies steamed open wax seals, modern ones hack encrypted servers. The tools changed, but the objective, control through information, remains identical. Perhaps the most enduring legacy is the ancient understanding that secrets are meaningless without analysis. Persian handlers profiling enemy generals' drinking habits and Chinese giant bureaus maintaining dossiers on regional leaders were early practitioners of what the CIA now calls patterns of life analysis. When Mossad agents spent years tracking Adolf Eichmann's routines in Argentina before snatching him in 1960, they were employing the same patient, observant tactics Byzantine spies used to tail dissident senators through Constantinople's alleyways. Yet there's a cautionary thread woven through this continuity. The Fragmentarii's descent from protectors to blackmailers mirrors modern debates over mass surveillance and privacy. Ancient empires learned too late that unchecked spy networks could corrode trust from within, a lesson echoed in Edward Snowden's revelations about 21st century overreach. The balance between security and liberty isn't a new dilemma. It's a tension as old as espionage itself. What truly connects past and present is the human element. Algorithms may now sift data, but like the Athenian spy who noticed a rival's unguarded back gate or the Viking agent who memorized tide patterns, breakthroughs still hinge on intuition and insight. When a Russian double agent today slips a USB drive into a crowded Berlin cafe, they're reenacting the same dance of risk and trust as a Roman speculator passing a wax tablet in the forum. Technology scales the game, but the rules were written in clay tablets and scrolls. The shadows have grown longer, but they still stretch from the same ancient sun. James Bond may strut across screens with high-tech gadgets, but his DNA traces straight back to the shadowy operatives of antiquity. That iconic scene where he casually orders a martini, shaken, not stirred. It's a modern echo of ancient spies using subtle signals, like the way Roman Fragmentarii agents would request wine mixed with water as a coded identifier in taverns. Hollywood's suave super spies didn't emerge from thin air. They're the glitzy descendants of figures like Chanakya's Gadhapurushas, who blended into royal courts with equal charm and lethality. Even Bond's notorious womanizing mirrors historical realities. Persian, honeypot agents and Byzantine seductresses like Theodora's inner circle proved romance could be as effective as a dagger for extracting secrets. Video games like Assassin's Creed take this inspiration further, weaving real spycraft into interactive fiction. When Altair scales Damascus's walls or Evie Fry deciphers cryptic messages in Victorian London, they're channeling techniques straight from the arthashastra and Byzantine agents in reviews. The game's eagle vision, highlighting threats in a crowd, isn't pure fantasy. It's a dramatization of how Spartan cryptaea agents memorized facial scars and regional accents to spot enemies. Even the iconic hidden blade finds precedent in history. Indian Vishakanyas wore poison-tipped hairpins, while Egyptian assassins favored slender copper needles dipped in venom, tools designed to kill quietly, just like the game's stealth takedowns. What makes these modern portrayals so compelling isn't their flashy gadgets, but their fidelity to timeless spy psychology. Game of Thrones' Littlefinger, whispering lies in brothels and council chambers, operates exactly like a Byzantine logothetes, exploiting human ambition. Metal Gear Solid's themes of betrayal and identity crisis mirror the Mauryan Empire's double agents, who sometimes forgot which side they truly served. Even the Kingsman's WWI-era spy network echoes Venice's Council of Ten, proving that the best stories borrow from history's playbook. Yet pop culture often misses the quieter brilliance of ancient espionage. Where films show explosions and car chases, real spies relied on patience, like the Han Dynasty agent who spent 3 years as a Xiongnu horse trainer to learn nomadic battle tactics. Games simplify code breaking into quick-time events, But cracking a Caesar cipher required the meticulousness of a scribe, not just button mashing. This romanticization isn't necessarily bad. It keeps the spirit of ancient spycraft alive, even if the details get polished for drama. The true testament to these historical operatives, their methods feel fresh millennia later. When Mission Impossible's Ethan Hunt dangles from a ceiling to steal data, he's reenacting the Persian spy who infiltrated Babylon by hiding in a merchant's carpet. The Americans' Cold War dead drops straight from Viking agents leaving messages under specific rocks along trade routes. These parallels aren't coincidental. They're proof that the fundamentals of espionage are hardwired into human conflict. Sun Tzu would have applauded Call of Duty's sniper missions. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. Ultimately, these fictional spies succeed because they tap into something primal, the thrill of the unseen hand shaping history. Whether it's Bond's tuxedo or Cassandra's Spartan spear, the allure remains the same, the fantasy of being the one who knows all the secrets, just like the forgotten agents who once swayed empires from the shadows. And that's the most authentic tribute of all, keeping their legacy alive, not in dusty scrolls, but in the stories that make our pulses race. The shadows of ancient spies stretch far beyond crumbling ruins and forgotten scrolls. They pulse through the very heart of modern intelligence operations. Every encrypted email, every satellite reconnaissance mission, even the psychological profiling of enemy leaders owes a debt to those first shadow warriors who turned whispers into weapons. Consider this: when a cybersecurity analyst today thwarts a hacking attempt by tracing digital footprints, they're employing the same deductive instincts as a Byzantine agent in Rebu's agent spotting inconsistencies in a forged letter. Or when a diplomat reads between the lines of a tense negotiation, they're channeling the Han envoys who decoded meaning in a rival's slight hesitation over tea. The tools have evolved from hollow coins to quantum encryption, but the game remains unchanged. Control the narrative, and you control the future. What's truly humbling is realizing how little human nature has shifted. Sun Tzu's advice to appear weak when you are strong still guides military deception campaigns, just as Chanakya's lessons on turning enemies against each other fuel modern disinformation tactics. The Vikings manipulated perceptions with staged omens. Today, social media bots amplify divisive narratives using eerily similar psychological leverage. Even the Roman Frumentarii downfall, corruption from unchecked power, mirrors contemporary debates over surveillance states. History doesn't just repeat, it whispers its warnings through these echoes. Yet amidst the darkness there's inspiration. These ancient operatives remind us that brilliance thrives under constraints. No satellites use carrier pigeons. No wiretaps hide messages in wax tablets. Their creativity in the face of limitation is a masterclass in resourcefulness, one that resonates in an age drowning in data but starving for insight. The next time you hear about a stolen election or a corporate espionage scandal, remember, it's all part of a dance choreographed centuries ago, where the steps were first perfected by spies whose names we'll never know. So as we sign off from this journey through the clandestine past, here's a challenge for you. Look closer at the world around you. That innocuous street vendor, that unremarkable administrative assistant, could they be today's Gudhapurushas or Krypteia, blending in plain sight? The shadows never really fade, they just find new shapes. And if this exploration has left you as awestruck as we are, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden gears, and drop a comment below. Tell us which ancient spies' tactics blew your mind. Was it Zopyrus's brutal sacrifice, Lai's poetic subterfuge, or the Viking merchants who mapped targets between sips of mead? The conversation doesn't end here. After all, the best secrets are the ones we uncover together.